The desert sun blazed mercilessly over Forward Operating Base Courage in Afghanistan's Helmand province. Staff Sergeant Maria Santos wiped the sweat from her brow as she completed her third patrol of the week. The 28-year-old combat medic had been deployed for 8 months, and each day brought new challenges in this unforgiving landscape where danger lurked behind every sand dune. Maria's unit, the 47th Medical Support Company, had been stationed at FOB Courage since January. Their primary mission involved providing medical support to various military units operating in the region, but Maria's role extended far beyond traditional medic duties. She had volunteered for dangerous convoy escort missions, earned the respect of infantry soldiers, and saved countless lives under enemy fire. On this particular Tuesday morning in September, Maria received orders that would change everything. Intelligence reports indicated that a remote village called Khost Feroza, approximately 15 kilometers northeast of their base, had been hit by Taliban forces during the night. Civilian casualties were reported, and the village's makeshift clinic had been destroyed in the attack. "Santos, you're leading the medical response team," announced Captain Robert Hayes, the base's medical officer. "Take Martinez and Jackson with you. Intel suggests the area might still be hot, so you'll have Marine escort." Maria nodded, already mentally preparing for what lay ahead. She had worked with Marine units before and found them professional, though sometimes overly protective of what they perceived as non-combat personnel. This attitude occasionally created tension, especially when medics needed to move quickly to reach wounded civilians or soldiers. The Marine escort team was led by Gunnery Sergeant Michael Tank Thompson, a 32-year-old career Marine from Texas. Tank commanded a squad of 8 Marines, all combat veterans with multiple deployments under their belts. His reputation for aggressive tactics and unwavering loyalty to his men was well known throughout the base. As the convoy prepared to depart, Tank briefed his Marines on the mission parameters. "Listen up, Marines. We're escorting medical personnel to a village that took heavy fire last night. Our job is to provide security while they do their thing. Keep your eyes open and stay sharp." Corporal Danny Rodriguez, Tank's second-in-command, raised a concern that had been bothering him since receiving the mission briefing. "Gunny, are we sure about taking Santos on this run? Word is the Taliban are still operating in that sector. Might be better to send an all-male medical team." Tank considered this for a moment. While he respected Maria's abilities, he shared some of Rodriguez's concerns about bringing female personnel into potentially hostile territory. "Orders are orders, Rodriguez. But keep extra eyes on the medics. We can't afford to have anyone become a liability out there." The convoy consisted of 3 vehicles, 2 armored Humvees carrying the Marines and 1 medical support vehicle driven by Maria's team. As they departed FOB Courage, the landscape stretched endlessly before them, a harsh terrain of rocky hills and sparse vegetation that had witnessed countless conflicts throughout history. During the 40-minute journey to Khost Feroza, Maria reviewed intelligence reports about the previous night's attack. Taliban forces had apparently targeted the village because local leaders had been cooperating with coalition forces, providing information about insurgent movements in the region. The attack was both punishment and warning to other villages considering similar cooperation. As they approached Khost Feroza, smoke still rose from several destroyed buildings. The village appeared eerily quiet, with no visible signs of civilian activity. Tank ordered his Marines to establish a security perimeter while Maria's team prepared to assess medical needs and provide treatment to any survivors. The initial survey revealed devastating damage. The village clinic had been completely destroyed, and several homes showed evidence of rocket-propelled grenade attacks. However, most civilians had apparently fled during the night, seeking refuge in nearby caves or with relatives in distant villages. Maria and her team began methodically searching for wounded civilians, moving from building to building while Tank's Marines maintained overwatch positions. The work was slow and dangerous, as Taliban fighters were known to leave behind improvised explosive devices or conduct ambush attacks on relief teams. After 2 hours of searching, they discovered an elderly Afghan man hiding in a collapsed building's basement. He had suffered severe burns on his arms and face from the fire that consumed his home. Maria immediately began treating his wounds while her team prepared evacuation procedures. The old man, who identified himself as Haji Mahmud, spoke broken English learned during previous interactions with coalition forces. Through their conversation, Maria learned that Taliban fighters had specifically targeted his family because his son had been providing information to American forces about weapons caches hidden in the mountains. "They take my grandson," Mahmoud whispered through tears. "Little boy, only 8 years old. They say he will learn to fight Americans like his father should have done." This information changed everything. The Taliban had kidnapped a child, and intelligence suggested they might still be operating in the immediate area. Tank faced a difficult decision: continue the medical mission as planned or pursue the kidnappers while the trail remained fresh. He contacted base command for guidance, but communications were hampered by atmospheric conditions common in the region. Without clear orders and facing a time-sensitive situation, Tank made the decision that would haunt him for years to come. "Santos, we need to wrap this up and return to base," he announced. "Intel suggests Taliban fighters are still in the area, and I won't risk my Marines or your team for extended operations without proper support." Maria looked up from treating Mahmoud's wounds, her face reflecting both understanding and frustration. She knew Tank was following proper tactical procedures, but leaving the kidnapped child's fate uncertain went against everything she believed as both a soldier and a human being. "Gunny, we could at least check the caves in the northern hills," she suggested. "If they're holding the boy nearby, we might be able to locate him before they move him to a more secure location." Tank shook his head firmly. "Negative, Santos. We're not equipped for search and rescue operations. We'll report the kidnapping through proper channels and let specialized units handle it." The tension between following orders and moral obligation created an uncomfortable atmosphere as they prepared to evacuate Haji Mahmoud to the base medical facility. Maria continued treating the old man while silently questioning the decision to abandon the search for his grandson. As they loaded Mahmoud into the medical vehicle, distant gunfire echoed from the northern hills where Maria had wanted to search. The sound was brief but unmistakable: automatic weapons fire followed by what sounded like a child's scream. The Marines immediately took defensive positions, scanning the horizon for threats while Tank attempted to re-establish communications with base command. However, the gunfire ceased as quickly as it had begun, leaving an ominous silence hanging over the village. "Could have been Taliban executing villagers they caught fleeing," Rodriguez suggested grimly. "Or maybe coalition forces engaged them." Tank knew that without proper intelligence or backup support, investigating the gunfire would be extremely risky. His primary responsibility was protecting his Marines and the medical team, not pursuing unknown contacts in hostile territory. "Mount up," he ordered. "We're returning to base immediately." The convoy began its journey back to FOB Courage, but the atmosphere had changed dramatically. Maria sat in silence beside the wounded Afghan man, haunted by the possibility that they had abandoned a child to die. Tank's Marines were equally troubled, though they trusted their leader's tactical judgment. Halfway back to base, their convoy encountered another coalition patrol heading toward Costa Feroza. The patrol leader, Army Captain James Mitchell, had received intelligence about Taliban movement in the area and was investigating reports of civilian casualties. Tank briefed Mitchell on their findings, including the kidnapping and the gunfire they had heard. Mitchell's expression grew grave as he processed this information. "We've got reports that a Taliban cell captured a local boy this morning," Mitchell confirmed. "They're apparently using him as leverage to prevent his father from providing more intelligence to coalition forces." This confirmation hit Tank like a physical blow. They had been within range of the kidnapped child and had chosen to withdraw rather than risk an unauthorized rescue operation. The decision, while tactically sound, now felt like a moral failure. As the two convoys prepared to continue their respective missions, Maria made a decision that would define her character for years to come. She approached Tank with a proposal that would test both their courage and their commitment to their sworn duty. "Gunny, I'm requesting permission to return with Captain Mitchell's patrol," she announced. "That boy needs medical attention, and if we locate him, someone with combat medical training should be present." Tank stared at her for several seconds, processing the implications of her request. Allowing Maria to transfer to another unit's operation without proper authorization violated several regulations, but abandoning a kidnapped child to Taliban fighters violated something far more fundamental. The decision Tank made in that moment would haunt him for the rest of his military career, but it also revealed the character that had earned him the respect of every Marine under his command. The sun was beginning to set over the Afghan landscape as two separate convoys prepared to determine the fate of one small boy and the conscience of everyone involved in this mission. The choices made in the next few hours would redefine what it meant to be a soldier, a protector, and a human being in the chaos of war. As Maria prepared to join Mitchell's patrol, she reflected on the oath she had taken when enlisting in the army, to protect and defend those who could not protect themselves. Sometimes that oath required soldiers to risk everything for people they had never met, in places most Americans would never see, for reasons that textbooks could never adequately explain. The wounded old man, Haji Mahmoud, gripped Maria's hand as she prepared to leave their vehicle. Through tears and broken English, he whispered a prayer for her safety and expressed gratitude for her willingness to help find his grandson. In that moment, Maria understood that being a soldier meant more than following orders or completing missions successfully. It meant standing at the intersection of duty and conscience, making choices that would echo through countless lives for years to come. The stage was now set for a confrontation that would test every principle these warriors had sworn to uphold. Captain Mitchell's patrol consisted of 12 soldiers from the 82nd Airborne Division, all experienced in conducting search and rescue operations in hostile territory. When Maria requested to join their mission, Mitchell initially hesitated, knowing that inter-unit transfers during active operations required specific authorization. However, the urgency of locating the kidnapped child and Maria's specialized medical training convinced him to approve her request. Tank watched with a mixture of pride and concern as Maria transferred her medical equipment to Mitchell's vehicles, knowing that he was potentially sending her into a situation far more dangerous than their original mission. "Santos, you stay in contact every 30 minutes, Tank instructed. If things go sideways, you call for immediate extraction. My Marines will be monitoring your frequency." Maria nodded, understanding that Tank's concern came from genuine care for her welfare rather than doubt about her capabilities. She had proven herself countless times during their deployment, earning the respect of even the most skeptical soldiers through her competence and courage under fire. As Tank's convoy continued toward FOB Courage with the wounded Haji Mahmoud, Maria's new mission began with a detailed briefing from Captain Mitchell. Intelligence reports suggested that the Taliban cell responsible for the kidnapping consisted of 8 to 10 fighters led by a regional commander known for his brutality toward civilians who cooperated with coalition forces. The cell's usual operating pattern involved capturing family members of perceived collaborators and holding them in remote mountain caves while negotiating for information or compliance. In this case, the 8-year-old boy represented leverage against his father's continued cooperation with American intelligence operations. Mitchell's patrol approached the northern hills where gunfire had been heard earlier, moving carefully through terrain that favored defenders. The rocky landscape provided numerous hiding places for both Taliban fighters and potential ambush sites that could devastate an advancing patrol. Maria found herself thinking about the kidnapped child as they navigated the treacherous terrain. 8 years old was barely past toddlerhood, yet this boy was experiencing trauma that would shape his entire worldview about Americans, soldiers, and the complex conflict engulfing his homeland. The patrol's Afghan interpreter, a man named Rashid who had worked with coalition forces for 3 years, provided crucial cultural context about the situation they were entering. He explained that the kidnapped boy's father, Abdul Rahman, had been providing information about Taliban weapon caches because his brother had been killed in a Taliban execution the previous year. Rahman's family has suffered much from Taliban, Rashid explained in heavily accented English. First they kill his brother for sending children to school. Now they take his son. This is their way of controlling people through fear. This background information helped Maria understand the broader implications of their mission. They weren't just rescuing one child, they were demonstrating to the entire region that cooperation with coalition forces wouldn't result in abandonment when Taliban fighters retaliated. As the patrol advanced deeper into the hills, they discovered evidence of recent Taliban activity. Fresh footprints in sandy areas, discarded food containers, and improvised latrine sites suggested that a group had camped in the area within the past 24 hours. Mitchell ordered his soldiers to spread out and conduct a systematic search of cave systems known to be used by insurgent forces. The work was slow and dangerous, as each cave could potentially contain armed fighters or improvised explosive devices designed to kill anyone who entered. Maria accompanied the search teams, knowing that if they located the kidnapped child, immediate medical assessment would be crucial. Children held by Taliban forces often suffered from dehydration, malnutrition, and psychological trauma that required immediate intervention. The third cave they searched contained evidence of recent occupation, blankets, cooking utensils, and, most significantly, a child's shoe that matched the description provided by Haji Mahmoud. The discovery confirmed that they were on the right trail, but it also indicated that the Taliban fighters had moved recently, possibly alerted by the earlier coalition activity in the village. Rashid examined the abandoned campsite and provided his assessment of the situation. "They leave maybe 2-3 hours ago," he reported. "Moving deeper into mountains, probably toward Pakistan border where coalition forces cannot follow." This created a time pressure that Mitchell had hoped to avoid. If the Taliban cell reached the border region, rescuing the child would become virtually impossible due to political restrictions and the presence of larger insurgent forces. Mitchell made the decision to continue pursuit despite the risks involved. His patrol began following the trail left by the fleeing Taliban fighters, moving through increasingly treacherous terrain as daylight began to fade. Maria found herself struggling to keep pace with the infantry soldiers as they climbed steep rocky paths that seemed more suited for mountain goats than humans carrying full combat equipment. However, her determination to help the kidnapped child pushed her beyond normal physical limitations. As darkness fell, the patrol reached a vantage point overlooking a valley where intelligence suggested several Taliban safe houses were located. Through night vision equipment, they could observe lights and movement around one particular compound that showed signs of recent activity. Mitchell established an observation post and began planning a potential assault on the compound. However, the tactical situation was complicated by several factors: unknown number of enemy fighters, presence of civilian family members, and the need to ensure the kidnapped child's safety during any military action. "Santos, I need your assessment," Mitchell said quietly. "If we go in hard and fast, what's the likelihood of keeping the kid alive during the firefight?" Maria considered the question carefully, drawing on her experience treating children in combat situations. "Taliban fighters usually keep hostages in the most secure part of any building," she replied. "If we can identify where they're holding him, a coordinated assault might work. But if they realize they're about to be overrun, they might kill him rather than let him be rescued." This sobering assessment forced Mitchell to reconsider his options. A direct assault carried significant risks, but allowing the Taliban cell to escape across the border would condemn the child to an uncertain fate and send a message to other Afghan families that cooperation with coalition forces offered no protection. While Mitchell weighed these difficult choices, Maria noticed movement near the compound that changed everything. Through her binoculars, she observed a small figure being moved between buildings, unmistakably a child matching the age and size of their target. "Captain, I have visual on what appears to be the hostage," she reported. "Southeast corner of the main building, being moved by 2 adult males." This confirmed that they had located the correct target, but it also revealed that the child was being closely guarded and could be used as a human shield if Taliban fighters detected the approaching coalition patrol. Mitchell contacted base command to request guidance, but communication difficulties in the mountainous terrain prevented clear instructions from reaching the patrol. Faced with a time-sensitive situation and limited options, Mitchell made the decision to proceed with a carefully planned rescue operation. The plan involved dividing his patrol into 3 teams: one would provide overwatch and covering fire, another would assault the compound's main entrance to draw attention, and a third would attempt to locate and secure the hostage through a rear entrance. Maria would accompany the hostage rescue team, providing immediate medical care if the child had been injured or required treatment for trauma-related conditions. Her presence would also help calm the boy if they successfully located him, as children often responded better to female caregivers in stressful situations. As the teams moved into position, Maria felt the familiar combination of fear and determination that accompanied high-stakes medical missions. Her job was to save lives, but doing so often required placing herself in situations where her own life was at considerable risk. The assault began at 0200 hours with a diversionary explosion at the compound's front gate. Taliban fighters immediately responded with automatic weapons fire, believing they were facing a frontal assault by a larger coalition force. Maria's team used this distraction to breach the rear wall of the compound and begin searching for the hostage. The interior of the building was dark and confusing, with multiple rooms and corridors that could hide armed fighters or civilians. Moving methodically through the building, the rescue team cleared each room while listening for any sounds that might indicate the child's location. The firefight at the front of the compound continued, providing cover noise but also creating urgency to complete the mission before Taliban reinforcements arrived. In the fourth room they searched, Maria discovered something that made her blood run cold: child's clothing stained with blood and clear signs that the room had been used to restrain someone. However, the child was nowhere to be found, suggesting he had been moved again during the night. The team leader made the difficult decision to abort the rescue attempt rather than risk casualties searching an apparently empty building. As they prepared to withdraw, Maria heard something that stopped her cold: a child's muffled crying coming from somewhere beneath the floor. The building contained a basement or cellar that they had not yet discovered, and the sound suggested that the hostage might be hidden below ground level. However, descending into an unknown underground space during an active firefight represented an extreme risk that could result in the entire rescue team being trapped or killed. Maria faced a choice that would define her character for the rest of her life: withdraw with her team and hope that other opportunities to rescue the child would arise, or risk everything to investigate the source of the crying she had heard. The decision she made in that moment would echo through countless lives and challenge every assumption about courage, duty, and the true meaning of being a soldier in an impossible situation where every choice carried life or death consequences. Without hesitation, Maria made the decision that would haunt Tank and his Marines for years to come. She signaled to the team leader that she had located the source of the crying and pointed toward what appeared to be a concealed entrance to a basement area beneath the building. Sergeant First Class Kevin Walsh, leading the rescue team, immediately recognized the extreme danger of entering an unknown underground space during active combat. Taliban fighters were known to booby-trap basement areas and cellars, creating death traps for anyone attempting to search them. "Santos, we need to withdraw now," Walsh ordered firmly. "We can't risk the entire team for an uncertain situation." Maria understood the tactical logic behind Walsh's decision, but the sound of a terrified child crying in darkness below their feet made retreat impossible for her to accept. "Sergeant, give me 2 minutes to check that basement. If it's the boy, we can't leave him." Walsh faced the same impossible choice that had confronted Tank earlier: follow proper tactical procedures or risk everything to save one child. The firefight above them was intensifying, and Taliban reinforcements could arrive at any moment. "1 minute, Santos. If you don't find him immediately, we're gone." Maria located the basement entrance hidden beneath a heavy wooden panel and carefully descended into the darkness below. Her night vision equipment revealed a small underground chamber that had been used to store supplies, but, more importantly, she discovered 8-year-old Jamil Rahman huddled in the corner, terrified and injured. The boy had suffered a broken arm and showed signs of severe dehydration, but he was alive and conscious. Maria immediately began providing emergency medical care while trying to calm the frightened child using the few Pashto phrases she had learned during deployment. "American soldier," she said softly in broken Pashto. "Here to help. Safe now." Jamil looked at her with wide, frightened eyes that reflected months of trauma beyond what any child should experience. However, something in Maria's gentle manner and medical care began to penetrate his fear, and he allowed her to splint his broken arm and provide water from her emergency supplies. The challenge now was extracting both herself and the injured child from the basement while the firefight continued above them. Walsh's team had already been in the building longer than planned, and staying much longer would risk being trapped when Taliban fighters regrouped. Maria carefully lifted Jamil and carried him toward the basement entrance, moving slowly to avoid aggravating his injuries. The boy weighed less than she had expected, evidence of the malnutrition he had suffered during captivity. As they emerged from the basement, the firefight above reached a crescendo. Taliban fighters had apparently realized that the main assault was a diversion and were now searching for the infiltration team that had breached their compound. Walsh made the decision to extract immediately, knowing that their window of opportunity was rapidly closing. The team moved through the building toward their planned extraction route while Maria carried Jamil and provided medical care during movement. However, their extraction was complicated by the arrival of Taliban reinforcements who had surrounded the compound and cut off their planned escape route. The rescue team found themselves trapped in a building with limited ammunition and no clear path to safety. Captain Mitchell, monitoring the situation from his overwatch position, faced a terrible choice: risk his entire patrol in a desperate rescue attempt or abandon the trapped team to prevent further casualties. The decision was made for him when Maria's voice crackled over the radio with a report that changed everything. "Base, this is Santos. We have the package, but he's in critical condition. Requires immediate medical evacuation." This communication revealed that the rescue mission had been successful, but it also confirmed that the child needed urgent medical care that could only be provided at a proper medical facility. Mitchell immediately ordered a full assault on the Taliban positions surrounding the compound, regardless of the tactical risks involved. The battle that followed lasted 3 hours and involved every coalition asset in the region. Apache helicopters provided close air support, artillery units delivered precision strikes on Taliban positions, and additional ground forces were deployed to secure the area. During the firefight, Maria continued providing medical care to Jamil while the building shook from explosions and gunfire. The boy's condition was deteriorating due to internal injuries she hadn't initially detected, and she realized that without immediate surgical intervention, he might not survive. Using her combat medical training, Maria performed emergency procedures in a war-zone basement that would challenge experienced surgeons in a fully equipped hospital. Her actions during those critical hours saved Jamil's life and demonstrated the level of skill and dedication that made her one of the most respected medics in the theater. When coalition forces finally broke through Taliban defenses and secured the compound, they found Maria unconscious from exhaustion, still protecting Jamil with her own body. Both had survived, but Maria had suffered injuries from falling debris during the firefight. The successful rescue operation became legendary throughout the region, but it also revealed the cost of the choices made earlier in the day. Tank's decision to withdraw from the initial mission had been tactically correct, but it had also meant abandoning a child to circumstances that nearly resulted in his death. When Maria was evacuated to the base medical facility alongside Jamil, Tank was waiting at the landing zone with his Marines. The guilt he felt about his earlier decision was written clearly on his face as he watched medics transfer both Maria and the boy to the base hospital. "Santos," he said quietly as she was being loaded onto a stretcher. "I'm sorry we didn't." Maria interrupted him with a weak but determined voice. "Gunny, you made the right tactical decision. But sometimes being a soldier means accepting that tactical decisions and moral obligations don't always align." This exchange would haunt Tank for months afterward as he questioned whether following proper procedures was always the right choice when human lives hung in the balance. Maria's courage had saved a child's life, but it had also demonstrated the limitations of his own decision-making in complex moral situations. Jamil Rahman recovered from his injuries over the following weeks, but his father, Abdul Rahman, made the decision to relocate his family to a refugee camp rather than return to their village. The Taliban's willingness to target children had made it clear that continued cooperation with coalition forces would result in ongoing threats to his family. This outcome highlighted the broader implications of the rescue mission. While Jamil's life had been saved, the intimidation tactics employed by Taliban forces continued to be effective in discouraging Afghan cooperation with coalition efforts. Maria spent 2 weeks recovering from her injuries before returning to full duty, but the experience had changed her perspective on the role of military medical personnel in combat operations. She had proven that medics could be warriors when circumstances demanded it, but she had also learned that such actions came with personal costs that extended far beyond physical injuries. The relationship between Maria's medical unit and Tank's Marines evolved significantly after the rescue operation. The Marines developed a deeper appreciation for the courage and capabilities of combat medics, while Maria's team gained respect for the difficult tactical decisions that infantry leaders faced daily. However, the most significant impact was on Tank himself. He began questioning many of the assumptions about gender roles in combat that had influenced his earlier decisions. Maria's actions had demonstrated that courage and combat effectiveness were not determined by gender but by individual character and training. 3 weeks after the rescue operation, Tank requested a private meeting with Maria to discuss what had happened and how it should influence future operations. This conversation would prove to be a turning point for both soldiers and would establish principles that guided their actions for the remainder of their deployment. The meeting took place in a quiet corner of the base mess hall during an off-duty period when few other personnel were present. Tank had clearly struggled with his decision-making during the original mission and needed to understand how to prevent similar situations in the future. "Santos, I need to ask you something," Tank began hesitantly. "When you requested to join Mitchell's patrol, did you think I was wrong to withdraw from the search initially?" Maria considered her response carefully, understanding that Tank's question went beyond simple tactical analysis. He was questioning his own judgment and leadership in a situation where there had been no clearly correct answers. "Gunny, you made a decision based on the information available and your responsibility to protect your Marines and my team," she replied. "The fact that we later discovered the child was in immediate danger doesn't make your decision wrong, it just makes the situation tragic." This answer provided some comfort to Tank, but it also raised deeper questions about how military leaders should balance tactical safety with moral obligations when operating in complex environments where civilian lives were at stake. The conversation continued for nearly 2 hours as both soldiers explored the ethical dimensions of their profession and the personal costs of making life-or-death decisions with incomplete information. By the end of their discussion, Tank had reached a conclusion that would influence his leadership style for the rest of his career. Effective military leadership required not just tactical competence but also the moral courage to accept personal risk when protecting innocent lives. This realization would be tested sooner than either soldier expected, as intelligence reports indicated that Taliban forces were planning a major offensive against coalition positions throughout the region. 2 months after the rescue of Jamil Rahman, Forward Operating Base Courage received intelligence indicating that Taliban forces were planning a coordinated assault on coalition positions throughout Helmand province. The attack was scheduled to coincide with a major religious holiday when Taliban commanders believed coalition forces would be less prepared for sustained combat operations. Tank's Marine unit and Maria's medical team found themselves assigned to a critical mission, establishing an advanced aid station at a remote checkpoint that controlled access to 3 Afghan villages known to support coalition efforts. The checkpoint, designated Outpost Sierra, was located in terrain that favored attackers and had limited options for reinforcement or evacuation. The assignment represented exactly the kind of high-risk operation that Tank had previously tried to avoid when medical personnel were involved. However, his perspective had changed dramatically since witnessing Maria's courage during the child rescue mission, and he now understood that combat medics were warriors who happened to specialize in saving lives rather than taking them. Maria's medical team had also evolved since the rescue operation. Her actions had inspired other medics throughout the region, and her unit had developed new protocols for operating in high-threat environments where traditional medical procedures might not be possible. The convoy to Outpost Sierra departed FOB Courage on a cold October morning with Tank's Marines providing security for Maria's expanded medical team, which now included additional personnel and equipment needed to establish a forward aid station capable of handling mass casualty situations. During the journey, Tank and Maria discussed lessons learned from their previous operations and how those experiences should inform their approach to the current mission. Their professional relationship had evolved into genuine mutual respect, with each recognizing the other's expertise and commitment to mission success. "Santos, intelligence suggests we might face sustained contact at Sierra," Tank informed her during a convoy halt. "Your aid station could become a primary target if Taliban forces realize how many casualties they could inflict by taking out our medical capability." Maria nodded, understanding the tactical implications. "Gunny, my team is prepared for that possibility. We've trained for operating under fire and know how to provide care while maintaining defensive positions." This conversation reflected how much both soldiers had changed since their first operation together. Tank no longer viewed medical personnel as liabilities to be protected, and Maria had fully embraced the reality that combat medics in Afghanistan needed to be prepared for sustained firefights while providing medical care. Outpost Sierra consisted of a small compound built around an abandoned Afghan National Police station. The position offered good fields of fire in most directions but was vulnerable to mortar attacks from surrounding hills. Previous units had improved the defenses somewhat, but the outpost remained a challenging position to defend with limited personnel. Maria's team immediately began establishing their aid station in the most protected area of the compound while Tank's Marines prepared defensive positions and established observation posts on the surrounding high ground. The work proceeded quickly, as intelligence reports suggested that Taliban attacks could begin within 24 hours. The first indication of Taliban activity came that evening when long-range observation detected movement in the hills surrounding Outpost Sierra. Tanks Marines counted at least 30 fighters moving into positions that would allow coordinated attacks from multiple directions. "This is going to be bigger than we expected," Tank reported to Base Command. "Request immediate reinforcement and air support on standby." However, communication with FOB Courage was hampered by atmospheric conditions and potential Taliban jamming equipment. The small garrison at Outpost Sierra found themselves potentially facing a major assault with limited support options. Maria spent the evening preparing her aid station for mass casualties while Tanks Marines improved their defensive positions and redistributed ammunition to ensure all positions could sustain prolonged firefights. Both leaders understood that the coming battle would test every lesson they had learned during their deployment. The Taliban assault began before dawn with a coordinated mortar barrage that targeted the compound's main buildings and defensive positions. Tanks Marines responded with disciplined counter-battery fire while Maria's medical team took cover and prepared to treat casualties as soon as the bombardment lifted. The intensity of the initial attack exceeded all expectations. Taliban forces had apparently concentrated significant resources for this operation, employing tactics and equipment that indicated careful planning and substantial external support. When the mortar barrage ended, Taliban fighters launched ground assaults from 3 directions simultaneously. Tanks Marines found themselves outnumbered at least 3-1, fighting for their lives while trying to protect the medical personnel and maintain their defensive positions. Maria's aid station received its first casualties within minutes of the ground assault beginning. 2 Marines arrived with serious wounds from mortar fragments, requiring immediate surgical intervention to prevent them from bleeding to death. Working under fire, Maria performed emergency surgery while explosions rocked the compound and small arms fire cracked overhead. Her medical training had prepared her for treating combat wounds, but operating during sustained enemy contact tested skills she had never imagined needing. As the battle intensified, Tank faced a devastating tactical situation. His Marines were taking casualties faster than he could redistribute personnel to maintain defensive positions, and Taliban fighters were advancing steadily toward the compound despite heavy resistance. "Santos, we might need to prepare for evacuation," Tank announced during a brief lull in the fighting. "I don't know how much longer we can hold this position." Maria looked up from treating a wounded Marine and made a declaration that would define her legacy: "Gunny, I'm not leaving wounded Marines behind. If we can't evacuate them, then we hold this position regardless of the cost." This statement crystallized everything Tank had learned about courage, leadership, and the true meaning of military service. Maria was prepared to die rather than abandon wounded soldiers under her care, and her example inspired everyone in the compound to fight beyond their normal limitations. The battle for Outpost Sierra lasted 14 hours and became one of the most intense small unit actions of the entire Afghan conflict. Tanks Marines fought with desperate courage while Maria's medical team performed miracles under impossible conditions, saving lives while bullets flew around their aid station. During the height of the battle, Maria suffered serious wounds from grenade fragments but continued operating on wounded Marines while bleeding from multiple injuries. Her determination to save every possible life regardless of her own condition became legendary among the soldiers who witnessed it. Tank found himself fighting not just to protect his Marines but to protect Maria's medical team as they worked to save the wounded. The traditional roles of combatants and medical personnel had blurred completely as everyone fought to survive and protect each other. Coalition reinforcements finally arrived in late afternoon, breaking the Taliban assault and forcing the attackers to withdraw. The relief force found Outpost Sierra still in coalition hands, but at a terrible cost: 6 Marines killed, 12 wounded, and Maria unconscious from blood loss after saving 17 lives during the battle. The aftermath of the Battle of Outpost Sierra created ripple effects throughout the coalition command structure. Maria's actions had demonstrated capabilities that challenged traditional assumptions about gender roles in combat, while Tank's leadership had proven that courage could be inspired as well as commanded. When Maria regained consciousness in the base hospital 3 days later, Tank was sitting beside her bed with tears in his eyes. The gruff Marine gunnery sergeant had been fundamentally changed by witnessing her courage and dedication under fire. "Santos, I owe you an apology," he said quietly. When we first worked together, I thought my job was to protect you. I didn't understand that your job was to protect all of us. Maria's response would be remembered by every soldier who heard about it. Gunny, we protect each other. That's what makes us a team rather than just a collection of individuals with weapons. The Battle of Outpost Sierra marked the end of Maria's deployment in Afghanistan. Her injuries required extensive medical treatment and rehabilitation that would take place in military hospitals in Germany and the United States. However, her impact on Tank and his Marines would last for the remainder of their military careers. Tank requested transfer to Maria's medical company after completing his tour as a Marine infantryman, becoming one of the first Marines to cross-train as a combat medic. His experience had convinced him that saving lives was as important as taking them and accomplishing military objectives. Years later, when both soldiers had returned to civilian life, they maintained contact and frequently spoke at military training facilities about leadership, courage, and the importance of judging people by their actions rather than their appearance or gender. The story of Maria Santos became required reading at military medical schools and leadership development programs, demonstrating that heroism often emerges from unexpected sources and that the most important battles are sometimes fought by people who never intended to be warriors. Tank Thompson retired from the Marines as a sergeant major and became a high school teacher, using lessons learned from Maria to inspire young people to look beyond surface appearances when evaluating others' potential contributions to their communities. The wounded Afghan boy, Jamil Rahman, grew up in a refugee camp but eventually emigrated to the United States, where he became a doctor specializing in emergency medicine. His decision to pursue medical training was directly inspired by watching Maria risk her life to save his, demonstrating how individual acts of courage can influence lives for generations. The title "A Wounded Female Soldier Walked By" moments later, the Marines regretted everything captured the initial assumptions and subsequent transformation experienced by Tank and his Marines. Their regret was not about Maria's capabilities or courage, but about their own initial failure to recognize the character and competence that gender stereotypes had hidden from their perception. In the end, Maria Santos proved that heroism knows no gender boundaries and that the most important qualification for military service is the courage to risk everything for others, regardless of the personal cost or social expectations about traditional roles.